I'm going to get started. So, as we know, I'm Jenny Skoog, and this is my June book club for things I meant to tell you. And I'd love it if you could drop in the chat a hello, let us know where you're tuning in from. Tonight, I'm talking with Deborah Cox, Dr. Deborah Cox, about her book, Wife Material. It's
Yeah.
so good.
Life material. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
she's a
Mhm.
psychologist in Springfield, Missouri. She co-hosts a podcast called Reconceive. And she wrote this novel, Wife Material, which is fiction, but it feels like it was built from real life.
Mhm.
Probably because, in my edition of the book at least, she writes that much of it comes from her memories of growing up in a strict church where
Yeah.
women can't speak, musical instruments are forbidden, and shame does most of the heavy lifting.
Mhm.
Most of you know that I grew up in a Finnish Fundi sect called Lestadianism. I'm the youngest of nine, and I left at 21. Deborah grew up in a different faith in a different part of the country. And when I read her book, I kept thinking, how did we have a similar childhood?
Mm.
And so that's what I want to get into tonight. So, Deborah, thanks for being here. And let's start with your story. Um, Immediately, this emotion that came to the fore for me was anger.
Mhm.
And I wanted to know how anger motivates you and what you have done with your anger, not just in this book, but with your life's work.
What a great question to start with. Thank you so much, Jenny, and I'm thrilled to be here. Um, so anger, and other people have said that that was the predominant emotion that they felt when they were reading wife material. And I guess that makes sense. I mean, that's the most appropriate thing to feel when you read about women and girls being put in these situations where we are not to have voice, which means we are not to know what we know ultimately. Um, yeah, I actually majored in anger in graduate school. That's what I started to study, women's anger, and
Wait a
took it
second, was there a class
into.
called Women's Anger?
No, no, there should be.
I know.
But yeah, no, I mean, I had been having all of these nightmares about, statues of big important men of the Bible toppling over in great thunderstorms. So I mean, clearly I was angry, but we weren't supposed to be. I think really, I think even as a girl, I knew that I was angry and I fought back um, at some of the abuses and, spoke about being angry. And it always struck me as really important as an emotion. And I was aware that I had been conditioned to think that it was very unattractive. Um,
Oh, samesies.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
So,
I still struggle. I still struggle with my writing and anger, and I
mhm.
have to read my stuff like 50 times because it just sounds pissed off.
Yeah, yeah, and it should.
Hmm. Yeah.
Really, what I've come to with that is that anger is a part of the learning curve. And we don't have to stay there forever, but we really have to go through it because it's an emotion that imparts a certain kind of wisdom. And there's certain things that are hard to know about your situation if you are not allowed to feel it. So I certainly encourage the feeling of anger. In fact, I worked with a psychologist in Dallas who had punching bags installed in the offices we worked in, and in the hospital, in the charter hospital trauma unit. And we learned how to use those punching bags in a very controlled, timed way.
Wait, is that why the show Shrinking? Did you see that show?
Well, I saw parts of it. Did they do
Yes, he takes
anger?
his client to boxing because
Oh,
he's like, I can't help this guy. He just needs to punch something.
Yeah. Okay.
Very effective. I mean, I took up Muay
Okay.
Thai kickboxing to kind of
Mhm.
deal with my anger. And that kind of brings up this other aspect of embodied response to trauma, right?
Mhm.
Obviously, Bessel van der Kolk wrote The Body Keeps the Score,
Yeah.
and in your book, you deal with a lot of embodied emotions, right? They're called
Mhm.
feelings for a reason.
Mhm.
And I have found, aside from talk therapy, which has been life changing for me, that moving my body when I'm feeling a lot of feeling, when I'm having feelings,
Mhm.
I go for a run. And that
Yeah.
seems to, or I'll lift weights, and that seems to focus my anger, if that
Yeah.
makes sense.
Yeah, that's very helpful. And if you were to combine that with talking, where you were able to say to a specific person or character, I am so angry with you, and maybe even hurl some obscenities, that could be
I would never
even
do that.
more. Seriously?
I'm joking. Have
Okay.
we met? I have three favorite words. One is S, the other one is F, the other one starts with a D.
There you go. Yeah,
Yes,
that's all you need in a good
yes.
bat.
Yes. Well, I want to kind of get into this book then. Why a novel and not a memoir?
I'm glad you asked. I've been thinking about this because the book started off as a memoir. And I was in a writing group and getting lots of feedback about it. And I kept getting stuck and unable to complete a story arc on a particular section. Um, and so people were experiencing these bits of the story as kind of anticlimactic. And I realized it's because I didn't have the full story. I was not absorbing the full story, or I didn't know about it. A lot of things sort of happened or almost happened, or they happened, they completed in private and I never got resolution on the story. So that's one part of it.
Wow.
Um, the other part of it, another part of it, I was really in a trance. I was largely dissociated throughout my childhood, which may be why I didn't know what happened. I had to pick it up bits and pieces from different places.
When I was reading the prologue to the edition of the book that you sent me, you write, can I read this? I want to
Hmm.
just read this paragraph that really stuck out to me. I mean, I scribbled in the margins and I was like, I have to talk to her about this. You write, that's why the original wife material took me a decade to write, and part of why I could not find the details to finish this story as a memoir. That's why doing anything from with this new forward, the revised book, even the cover sends me into a not quite me feeling state, a non-feeling state, a state in which I have to sleep to reset myself back into presence. Sudden sleepiness is one form of disassociation that's associated with PTSD. And we also know that suppressed anger can lead to this drowsiness. So I have to surmise that part of me becomes outraged every time I deal with this subject matter. I'm not finished with my recovery. And I had a total eureka moment when I read that.
Mm,
I paused, I set the book down. I have to take a nap every time I sit down to write about my experience in this religion. And I didn't know that that was a trauma response. I just have
yeah.
always been like, I can't do this right now. Or I'll be mid sentence and I'll have to stand up and walk around, leave the house, walk the dog, and then I
Mm,
forget what I was doing. And so much of my childhood is like a friend of mine reached out to me because of the work that I've been doing on Substack. And she said, oh my God, I remember what a stitch you were. You dangled off a balcony in Minneapolis. And I was like, I did? I don't remember that. And my friend Andy was like, oh, I remember, you were outside of some pub in Minneapolis. That was like, I saw you there. And I was like, I was? I don't remember any of that. I don't,
oh, yeah.
there are huge swaths of my life that I
Yeah.
just don't remember.
Yeah. I really relate to that. My brother is the memory keeper. And he will say, do you remember when we did this or that? And I'll have that same kind of reaction, like, I should remember that, but I don't. So why? And so what I think happens, and we dissociate when we are chronically traumatized. We're more apt to dissociate when we're chronically in a trauma state. But there's another aspect to dissociation that I think we don't talk about, and that is dissociation is like a trance state. And when you want someone to go into a trance state, let's say you want to use clinical hypnosis to help someone stop smoking, you want to put them into this state. It's sort of a dissociative state, but it's a state in which we are very receptive to new ideas or to, strengthening old ideas. And the way we do that is we confuse the mind. We offer two messages that don't match. They contradict each other. So we offer like a double bind, and the person hearing that slips into a fog. The mind is trying to wrestle with why these things do not match, like the idea of a loving God who tells you to sacrifice your son. Like
Yeah.
these ideas of a loving parent who is going to hit you if you displease them. Many, many of these things that would happen or that would be talked about as right or parts of truth did not match up. And I knew it, and I'm sure you knew it on some level. And so our bodies were really wrestling with trying to make sense, trying to reconcile two things that didn't match.
Fascinating. Yeah. When you were talking earlier about writing fiction versus nonfiction, I think also I remember Hannah Pilvinen. She is an ex-Lestadian whose first novel was very much on like based on her past, right? It's a very Lestadian novel. It's called We Sinners. It was published in the 2010s. I'm not sure the date it was published, but it's called We Sinners by Hannah Pilvinen. And when you read the book, there's this family, the Rovaniemi family, and they have, I want to say, like 11 kids. And she comes from a large family. She's from the Detroit congregation. And there are so many parallels to the story that she tells and to the real life Lestadianism. And so I just wanted to make that parallel of it's sometimes easier to remove the self and talk about the things that happened in a conglomeration of like, oh, I'm going to have this character be a mixture of this person, and this person
Yeah.
with my own thoughts. And that's,
Yeah.
I think that's what a lot of fiction writers do.
Mm-hmm.
But books like this, there's that dissociative factor that comes in that I hadn't really thought about.
Yeah. And it's thick when I get into some of this. It's literally having to get up every few minutes and, like you said, move around, drink a caffeinated beverage.
Yeah,
Just to
and
stay.
I'm sure there were things in this book that were too hot to handle, that you did not write about, that you chose to take out. I would be so interested to know that if you wrote this book today, if you would put those things back in, or if you still feel like the past is coming to get you.
You know,
Tell me.
so yeah, I catch myself being afraid once in a while. And I think that I've moved past it all, but I catch myself being afraid that anything in my sexual history is grounds for some bad action, some kind of disapproval or punishment from, and who would it be? It's not logical, but it's a fear. It
Yeah,
still
I would know
grabs
nothing
me.
about that. I'm joking. It's like, I remember when my parents were still alive, I wrote this master's thesis, and it was really kind of an examination of my family. I was born and raised into this faith that, we use the N word, and we were very like casual and cavalier about, Jewish people, Native Americans, Black people, et cetera, et cetera. And when I got to college, when I finally went to college at age 38, I started taking Black Studies courses and realized that the Ku Klux Klan and the values of the Klan, in Minnesota in particular, were exactly the values that I was raised in. And I was like,
Oh,
wait
yeah.
a minute, were my grandparents Klan members? And then and so I did a master's thesis that kind of went into the archives, went into my own family history to like dig up like where did I get this from, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I remember when I was writing my master's thesis, I said, this is not going to be published. I left it under embargo until they died.
Oh,
And
yeah.
once my parents passed, I lifted that embargo because I said the only two people I care about, hurting are them because
Mm-hmm.
they did right by me in the end.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
Mm-hmm.
so yeah, that was my
Interesting.
only fear. But
Yeah.
now
And
I feel like the ministers or the
bring
leaders
it.
of my
Yeah.
get at me,
Yeah.
bro.
Yeah.
Like,
Right.
get
Yeah.
at me.
Those people, I guess those people I'm not afraid of. I
Yeah.
think maybe it would still be my mother.
I mean, it's a thing.
It's a thing. It's a
We
thing.
never
But
outgrow our parents.
funny you mentioned, though, the N word and African
Mm.
American studies, and because one of the things I learned about the Church of Christ, which was this denomination that I grew up in, the denomination that says it's not a denomination. It was formed in response to slaves being freed.
Yep.
So post Civil War, the Disciples of Christ, I guess, as an original denomination, or the home of these two groups, split because part of these people didn't approve of Black people having their own churches, and they were nicer in some cases than the church that the white people had, and then they wanted to keep their kids away from Black people, and that whole thing. So that's really a huge part of the basis of the Church of Christ.
And if you go into the Southern Baptist, I forget which denomination it is, but Robert P. Jones writes about this in his book. It's on my shelf. Anyway, he wrote a memoir, and in it he addresses the history of his church and the racism in the 1830s and 1840s, where they had a split between the Northern and the Southern Baptists for the same reason.
Oh,
Yeah.
yes.
And in my church, we definitely, it's a white supremacy, white, all the things.
And it was stated, right? It was said in so many words, or was it just in
No,
the
it was
subtext?
never. In fact, they like to hide behind this idea of, well, we recruit in Africa. We have believers in
Okay.
Africa because they go on recruiting missions, or what they call, what is it? Evangelizing or
Evangelizing.
what
Okay.
is the religious recruiting?
Well,
There's a term for it.
missionaries.
Missionary work. Yes,
Mhm,
yes,
mhm.
yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, so they hide behind that. And then they'll be like, well, and there was one, my friend's father was Black when I was growing up. So there was one.
Yeah.
So how could they possibly be?
Right. There were a few.
It's
Uh-huh.
fascinating. And then there was, in your book, you talk about this manufactured exceptionalism. And in your version of the religion, or in this book's version, you talk about the history of no instruments, like instruments are a sin. There will be no devil's music here. and that type of manufactured exceptionalism of like, well, we're better than them because we don't XYZ.
Yeah.
We're living a cleaner life than those people,
Right.
right?
Right.
That idea of being holier than thou or exceptional or
Mm-hmm.
special or
Mm-hmm.
chosen is
Yeah.
really fascinating to me.
Yeah. Yeah. And if you can, make yourself more humble, um, plainer, it's sort of a rebellion against the arts, I feel, in in the Church of Christ. I feel like even though that they place a high value on a cappella singing, which is what they do in those services, um, really the arts are, taking a back seat, I think. And so what was really crazy about my family is that both my parents were violinists. My mother still is a strings player. And so they had a life in the symphony world, and we were pretty much raised in that environment. That was, you know, several nights of the week. We were at rehearsals and, and in concerts and things. And so then we would go to this church where their passion, their musical passion, what was, I would argue God for them, was not allowed. And so they couldn't bring that part of themselves
And yet
into.
you would attend these concerts, yes?
Oh, yes. I mean, that's really the thing that I think kind of saved me. I think, we talk about this idea of choosing our parents. Did we choose our parents so that we would have certain experiences that helped us evolve? And I actually have come to think that I did. And one of the reasons I chose my parents, including my very difficult father, is for the music of it. And so then to live this very contradictory life where I knew better, I knew the music is better over here. This is God, this Beethoven. Um,
Mm,
and I didn't fall for what they wanted me to think about the a cappella music. I just couldn't. So it
fascinating.
seemed kind of pitiful.
Yeah. Yeah. That that dichotomy or being exposed to other faiths must have really given you a new perspective that
Yeah.
maybe your parents didn't see, or maybe that was intentional on their part. Fascinating.
I wonder about that too, because they were contracted to play the Easter cantata with a Baptist church in Little Rock, and so we would go and do that. And I just thought it was so lovely, and the experience of that grand music sound um, really was a very spiritual connection for me. And so one of the one of the great memories that I have from not so long ago, I guess this is when I was in my 40s, um, is that I got to take my parents to church. And my dad had Parkinson's, and he was in a facility in Arkansas, and my mom was still living there, and she was still on the faculty at this university, this Church of Christ University. And yeah, I picked my dad up. They were divorced by then, and it was Sunday morning. I picked him up and took him to this tiny Episcopal church, and we met my mom there. And I sat in between them as the organ played and the choir sang and the incense was filling the room. And I could feel that it was good for them, especially him at that point. I mean, he resonated. I mean, he would have never taken himself to a service on Sunday morning at the Episcopal Church, but he sat there with me and loved it. And that was mm, such a big moment for me.
Yeah, that's a big one.
Yeah.
Hmm. I want to talk a little bit about how in this book you write about Lizzie, this character. She is the oldest of four, and she's raising her siblings. She's responsible for her parents' outbursts. So when her father, very abusive father, um, takes out his anger on her, or is angry at the mother, he takes out his anger on her, on the daughter.
Mm.
And the daughter is kind of a receptacle for all of the, ills of the parents, their shoddy marriage, they're constantly putting her in charge of the kids, these unruly kids at church
Mhm.
or in these concert halls. So mothering before you're even grown yourself, boys and men holding all the power. Girls are meant to stay small, whether that's, overt or taught. Being, this idea of the good girl, the giggling, dumb, quiet on purpose wife.
Mhm.
This purity culture, marry young, your worth is tied to being a wife. And then this idea of trusting men on the inside, trusting believing men,
Yeah.
and fearing
Mhm.
men on the outside. It's usually the other way around. But when you're in it, it's so twisted.
Yeah.
There's this trust, and of course, the homophobia,
Mhm.
miserable marriages that builds, racism baked into the faith. So all of these things were very familiar to me. And I wanted to talk to you a little bit about a little girl's experience and what that, this feeling of my body is gross. I can't show off my knees. I have my period. Like there's just
Mhm.
so much shame associated with that. And then all of the dangers around her.
Yeah, my body is gross. That's a really good way to say that. I think we really did feel that way, or I know I did. Um, there was something shameful about starting your period. Um, and a lot of people will disagree with me about it. I do think that the concentrated dose of this doctrine that I got in this particular college, university environment, in this particular church, it was really strong. And so, somebody who was maybe not from that kind of system might have had a different Church of Christ experience, and maybe they felt more nurtured around adolescence, puberty, and all of that. But I really internalized a message that, yeah, women's bodies were gross. It was necessary that they developed the way they did because, of course, we needed to have babies. And but that idea of our bodies as being beautiful or being attractive as they were was kind of not in the mix. It was I I think we were supposed to be pretty from the neck up, and we were supposed to be thin, you know, but bodies, breasts, um, the kinds of things that now I know are a part of being a beautiful woman. Those those things were not really talked about. Like they were sort of ignored. I do remember like not wanting breasts, like really not wanting them.
If I look back now at why I felt like my body was gross and why I also was afraid of my body developing and the shame
Mm.
around my body, I think about what it must be like to be a man and a man in power and a man who rules and lords over, power over
Power
people,
over.
right?
Hmm.
And this idea that you have, a perfect wife who doesn't speak and doesn't, you have all the power. Of course, then when your wife or your daughter or a woman is it just woman's, um, of course that's gross to you because you have no idea how that body works. All you know is that you have power over it and you want to make that thing feel shame. And so whenever I think about a patriarchal structure, I think about that feeling of my body is gross. And to this day, I still have sexual shame,
Mm.
and the lasting effects of this religious abuse. Like, I mean, I was the youngest in my family, but I was also in a lot of ways a free nanny for my sisters.
Yeah.
And I'm so grateful for that experience on every level. Um, but it doesn't negate the fact that I truly was a free nanny. And so I can't imagine if I was the oldest of the family. But, like all of this, boys and men holding all the power, and this idea of being able to trust men
Mm-hmm.
as an adult,
Mm-hmm.
always being the good girl and deferring to boys and deferring to
Oh,
men.
yeah.
And, oh, I don't know. I'm stupid. I'm just a girl. I never
Mm-hmm.
realized I was smart until I went to college at 38, 39, and I was getting 4.0, 4.2 in college. Like,
Yeah.
you know what
Wow.
I mean? I was taking
Yeah.
6, 7 classes a semester. So
Yeah.
all of this
Wow.
has, like, long-term effects that I'm almost 50
Yeah.
years old. And here you and I are having this conversation about, like, well, when our parents die, like, you know what I mean? And we're still afraid of. So, this
Yeah.
religious
Yeah.
abuse that turns into PTSD, memory gaps, the fragmentation, the body shame,
Yeah.
it starts at a young age, and then it kind of ferments and foments into this thing. And that's where a good therapist comes in.
Yeah, yeah, and hopefully can help kind of untangle some of that. I mean, just as you were talking there, I was thinking about how much more so for that girl if her father is really gay and he's forced to be in a heterosexual marriage, and so he's really probably not not at all happy with the body that he's sleeping next to. Maybe he feels disgust. You
A
trying to,
100%.
yeah. So then, of course, that child is going to pick up on it.
So, there's been this tumult in the Laestadian faith in the last 6 months. In the last month, there's been an expose of a sister faith or an associated, like, it's the umbrella of Laestadianism, and then there's like different sects. And there's been a huge expose in ProPublica and the Minnesota Star Tribune about the rampant sex abuse in this faith, and this concept of forgive and forget, that the religion that I grew up in, it has the same exact shaming and, forgive and forget mentality and non-reporting to the police of
Mhm.
crimes committed against girls,
Yeah.
kids, boys, etc., women, and so on.
Uh-huh.
And so there is the in 2022, the faith that I grew up in experienced a schism, which they call a heresy. And so they label, people who don't believe correctly as heretics.
Mhm.
So, families are split apart. It's very traumatizing, not just for the people who are in the religion who clam up and don't dare to say anything, and for the people who've been kicked out and now where's their community, right? It's a very alienating and scary experience.
Mhm.
But then if you're in the religion, you've got 8 or 9 kids and you got married at 19, and you're just holding on, to faith with, but if you go see a therapist, you're betraying your faith. If you have these doubts, you need your sins
Mhm.
forgiven. There's
Mhm.
just so much shame and anxiety.
Right.
Um, and as we've been talking about, this stuff follows you throughout your life. And as a therapist, how does somebody get past that or move past it, outside of just talking to somebody?
Mhm.
I've
Mhm.
heard of this thing called EMDR and so on. Can you talk about that?
Yes. Oh, I'm so glad you mentioned EMDR because before EMDR, we were talking. That was the mode of moving information. And so it was a lot slower. And, it didn't really invite the nervous system, engage the nervous system in the process. And EMDR, which stands for eye movement desensitization and reprocessing, is a trauma treatment that engages the nervous system and helps to jumpstart our information processing system to metabolize lots of information very quickly. And it does that through pairing bilateral stimulation with a person's memory or imagination So we cue up your working memory with just the right elements, the picture that comes to mind, the emotion, the body sensation, and then the negative belief that goes with it. And then we apply maybe eye movements, maybe little pulses in the hands, um, tapping, anything to create a bilateral stimulus that activates the left hemisphere and then the right, back and forth and back and forth. And what happens when that is going on is the information that typically fires in the left hemisphere mixes with the information that typically fires in the right, and vice versa. So you get this mixing, which is quite normal, and that's how we learn. But if that process has been uh, stalled out, which happens through trauma, then we haven't been able to really learn all that we can learn, and we haven't metabolized that information so that we can use it. It's sort of like it's stuck. So yeah, EMDR is about moving information, and it works really well. I do find with religious trauma, we need a little something extra, and I'm actually working on a book right now about using EMDR with religious trauma. And I have a series on self EMDR, which is a little controversial, but um, it's taking the parts of this process home and starting it on your own, because there are many aspects of EMDR that you can do, and it's perfectly safe to
One
do
of
this
my
for
best friends
yourself.
does it at home. She
Yeah,
does the process of tapping.
yeah,
And she said it's been really effective. And she also was raised in the same faith
okay,
as I was. And it's been
yeah.
really helpful for her.
That's good. I think we probably need that because there are certain beliefs. So in EMDR they train us to listen for certain trauma beliefs like I'm not enough, I'm unworthy, I'm unattractive, I'm not loved. But in religious trauma, there are these really deep between the lines trauma beliefs like I can't afford to trust my inner knowing. I can't I can't trust myself. I can't listen to myself and feel safe about that. I am doomed. I deserve punishment. Those are, a little bit different in terms of trauma beliefs. And so we kind of need help ferreting out those really fine-grained trauma beliefs that we've absorbed from these environments.
I think I read somewhere that you also, in your therapy sessions, you incorporate some art. I mean, I know you're an artist. Of course, you're a storyteller. So, how does like talk therapy, EMDR, storytelling, art, how does all of that go together in your practice?
Well, I believe that everything is made better with beauty and art and color. So if we can paint and do bilateral stimulation through painting or coloring, all the better. Um, and so that's, I have to help somebody warm up to the idea because a lot of people will come in and say, I'm not creative and I don't want to mess with that. So um, that's kind of tricky. But yeah, using art of any kind, even just looking at art, just appreciating it and doing eye movements, moving your eyes around a piece of art kind of amplifies the effect that you're getting with movement. And so I've learned so much from colleagues like Tracy Maxfield, who does the Reconceived podcast with me, about intentional movement and how that is a way for us to upgrade our brains We literally get a better map of the body in the brain when we're moving intentionally and slowly. And so, in a way, that is another kind of EMDR. Going for a walk and being very intentional and noticing, does one side of my body feel different from the other side? Can I feel my spine? Does one leg feel heavier than the other one? What muscles am I engaging to move my arms? To very, aware, sort of just noticing every little muscle firing that you can possibly be aware of. And that
This is
grows over time.
this is really interesting and kind of a non sequitur, but I'm a personal trainer. And I do
That's right.
notice that people who are really I for instance have a client who is very she just has a lot going on and is constantly overwhelmed. I suspect she's a child of an abusive mother. And she's had all kinds of issues on one side of her body only.
Mm,
It's a non sequitur, but
mhm.
as you're talking, I'm like, whoa, I'm thinking about this person, the way
Yeah.
that she moves, like, I mean, even like in a two-arm row, it's like this. I'm like, girl, unshrug. You know what I mean? It's
Oh,
just
yeah.
constant overusing one side, underusing the
Yeah.
other, and has had, I mean, I don't want to go into her medical history, but has had some serious life-threatening problems on one side of her body from the neck
Mm-hmm.
to her feet. It's insane.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway,
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Did
yeah,
did
and
you
does not have a therapist.
and does not have a
Does not
therapist?
have it, has not, no.
Well, so there's this other system that I want to talk about just for a second. This is coming from Moshe Feldenkrais, who you may have read in your. Some trainers have used Feldenkrais as
Oh,
a
yes,
basis.
I
You
know,
know who that
yes,
is? Yeah,
Feldenkrait's
yeah,
method.
yeah, yeah. And so the exercises that he designed are
Mhm,
aimed at that kind of remapping the entire body
mhm.
in the
This is a
brain.
while ago. Wow, that's like a
Hmm.
blast from the past. That's like 2008 training. Like, I
Yeah.
heard about this, like the Feldenkrais method, like when I was at Reebok and Equinox back in the
Oh,
day.
yeah. Well, and he wrote in the 60s or 70s, I
Okay,
think. So
okay.
he's.
I'm gonna have to go back to that.
Yeah, yeah. I highly recommend it though, because it's meditation and it's very aware movement. It's very gentle and slow. There's nothing strenuous about it. Um, and somehow it helps with the integration of memory. I really don't know how that, but I mean, maybe it works on the same principles as EMDR.
Yeah, bringing it kind of full circle then, I collected oral histories from women who left this religion, and many of them found courage to leave by exercising, going for long walks and processing,
Yeah,
moving their body, doing
yeah,
calisthenics, push-ups, joining CrossFit, you know, all of these different ways to like find inner strength. And I have noticed in my business, and especially in myself, the stronger I get, I mean, truly, the stronger I get,
hmm.
the more she balls, the bigger my she balls, they become the size of church bells. I feel very emotionally strong because my
Yeah,
body is so strong. And
yeah,
so, if some of the people watching this are still afraid of seeking a therapist, these are some ways that you can find the courage, spend some time with yourself. Even if it's like a 20-minute walk where you bust out some squats and push-ups and lunges,
yeah.
you know, and just take some breaths along the way.
Hmm.
That oxygen will really help your brain. But also, I
Yeah,
wanted to come back to one other thing you talked about with the art piece that you do. I remember it triggered this memory. I remember when I was in preschool, this is how I knew Jesus was white and God was white, and Jesus was a white hippie. He was a dude with Birkenstocks or, leather sandals, and he had like this beard. And, through coloring. Listen,
Okay.
Deborah,
Yeah.
they put the crayons in the middle of the table. The table was covered in paper, and we each
Mm-hmm.
got our, like, page of, the A for angel, C for Christ, J for Jesus, whatever, and they were
Uh-huh.
all like white people.
Yeah.
So this stuff is really ingrained from,
Yeah.
from jump. And so I found, and this was during the pandemic actually. I ordered those coloring books, like the adult coloring books where they're
Mm.
like really intricate, and all the colored pencils and all of that stuff. And it was really therapeutic,
Oh,
especially, as my marriage was starting to crumble
yeah.
and
Mm.
the pandemic was so stressful,
Yeah.
you know. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a really great thought too. Because you don't have to be guided in an art experience to benefit from it and to have it be like a kind of self EMDR experience. We're we're processing while we're coloring. And it's a way to bypass the logical brain and just kind of be in a flow state while you're pondering. You don't even have to try.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I wonder if there's anybody in the chat who has any questions. If you guys have any questions, feel free to throw them in the chat. Um, yeah, Etta Madden says that I love the way Deborah encourages multiple methods and integrates them. So you and Etta Madden are deeply entwined. You guys are good friends.
Yeah. 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 We're collaborators.
Yeah. So tell me about this collaboration that you guys have in Springfield.
Yeah, we go way back. But we're right now. So I didn't know Etta until living here, and even though we grew up about an hour apart, and she wound up coming to the same university where I was. Yes, we met here, and we were both teaching at Missouri State, and both of us had interest in religion and coming out of religion, and so we were talking to women back in the early 2000s about um, their exits from strong religion. And so we were kind of collecting up narratives. And then we set that aside and we got busy with lots of other things. And now we're teaming up with a group of people through National Avenue Christian Church in Springfield to create what we're calling the Healing Hub. And this is a collective of people. Some of us are mental health professionals, and some of us have various other kinds of training. Etta is a literature professor and a writing teacher, so we're we're looking at different ways to offer programming to our community to bring people together who need to talk about religious trauma. And our motives are varied. I mean, we're wanting to offer um, healing and recovery from abuse, religious abuse, and various kinds of trauma, which, of course, there's a lot around here. But we're also hoping to build community because it feels like in a place like Springfield, Missouri, religion has fractured neighborhoods, it's fractured families, it has divided us into these poles that really don't represent the complexity and truth of who we are. And there's a lot of loneliness, and that's true everywhere. People are lonelier than ever. We're disconnected at the community level, and we need ways to kind of come back into proximity and talk about what we actually believe, what we actually feel, and what we've experienced. So that's what the Healing Hub is about. And yeah, Ed is one of my collaborators there.
I wish I lived in Springfield because I would love to join that. If I wanted to work with you in some capacity and I live in New Jersey,
Hmm.
could I work with you? How would I get in touch with you, and how would that work? Do you do virtual sessions? Like if I'm in Minnesota, let's say.
Well, I do virtual consultation, and I consult with people all over the place about religious trauma and about setting up workshops for community groups, church groups. And so my website, which is www.deborah.lcox.com, DeborahLcox.com, has a portal where you can make an appointment to consult about that. And I'd be happy to talk to anybody about that. And they can also send me an email and ask other kinds of questions, therapy questions, and that kind of thing. And also reach out to me about the Healing Hub.
I love this.
Yeah,
It's so great. A friend of mine and I, she's a social worker. She was like, we really need to, um, have a community offline. Like there's a lot of online, groups that
mhm,
turn toxic after a while because some people are still in the church and they're just lurking and enjoying the hate speech, and then
mm,
others are like looking for therapy or
mm,
looking for a community, and then there's everybody in between. Some people are sick of hearing it, you know what I mean? And so it doesn't always feel like a safe space, and so having an in-person place to go
yeah.
is so helpful, or even just having somebody who's not associated with that particular religion, but somebody who
Hmm.
has the background like you have, who understands the depth of this issue, religious abuse.
Yeah,
So
yeah. And also, I think there's something that is hugely validating about being able to talk to people who have experienced something similar and they're in their own process of deconstruction. And you don't even have to be in the same place in that process, but just getting the validation of, I didn't imagine that. That was actually real. They actually taught that, or that was actually my experience, and you had something similar. Because we go through this, I want to call it an invasion of our epistemic space, which is that space of our knowing, all kinds of knowing, whether it's information or sensations in the body, emotions, all of those kinds of things belong to our epistemic space, and we own that. But if you grew up in a very authoritarian religious sect, that epistemic space was invaded, and you were told that you didn't own that, and that if you thought certain thoughts, you were not okay. And so it really takes some unpacking to reclaim that space and to understand that when you get a gut feeling about something, that's really worth paying attention to.
absolutely.
I mean, it seems
Period.
obvious, right? But
Well, I
it's,
just never thought about it. I mean, I've never heard this word epistemic space before, and I wrote it down because I'm thinking about the etymology of that word. But anyway, you're absolutely right. It's an invasion of our epistemic space. I have to
yeah,
remember that. It,
yeah.
it is really an invasion. I was thinking about Viktor Frankl's book, Man's Search for Meaning, as you were talking, because here you have a man who has had everything taken from him, his hair, like, his body. Nothing is his except for, drum roll please, his brain.
Oh,
What's
yeah,
between his
yeah,
ears is
yeah.
his and his alone. And that, as James says, that my husband, he says that's true freedom. If you can find peace between the ears and have hope for the
Mm-hmm.
future. I mean, imagine you're in, these horrible conditions. You've got mites and lice and disease, and,
Right.
and you're still having to go, you know, chop rocks,
Mm-hmm.
in January with no
Mm-hmm.
clothes.
Mm-hmm.
How do you find the will to live?
Right.
It's all
Yeah.
in there. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, you're welcome. That concept has really been an important one for me. Craig Kanan, a colleague of mine here who does EMDR with children, used that terminology with me when I was sort of shadowing him and learning about doing EMDR with children in the social services system. And what he was pointing out to me was that, any sort of child maltreatment is an invasion of their epistemic space.
Mm,
And I just love that because it's not one thing, it's an invasion of your whole self.
I'm going to use it.
Yeah,
You.
yeah, cool. Yeah.
Well, Deborah, thank you so much. This
Thank you,
was quite the
Jenny.
conversation, and it was all I hoped it would be. For everybody
That's good.
listening, the book is called Wife Material. It's by Deborah Cox. If you have not ordered it, you should do it. I wanted to read the very first. I just wanted to read this. I got sucked in just from this. The wedding night, 1988. My new husband looked like a mound of biscuit dough. If you want to work with Deborah or just see if she's a fit, she's at deborah.lcox.com and she's on Psychology Today, right?
I am.
Yeah, she does free 15-minute consultations, as she said. So you're not committing to anything by reaching out. Go listen to her podcast, Reconceive 2. Next month's pick, I don't have it yet, but it's called Brave Not Perfect. It's by Reshma Sujani, Saujani, Reshma Sujani. I'll be talking about it with Tali Deassis Graham. She's a development and life coach. You can find her work on Substack at Habit Snacks. But I'll send a formal announcement on Substack this week. If you're not subscribed, you should do that. And you should subscribe to Deborah too. It's how you find out about all good things. But thanks for being here. And thank you, Deborah.
Thank you. Thank you all.
Good
Loved
night.
it. Good night.
Same.